Isaac Sarason is a skilled hacker, formerly employed by British Telecom-Sprint. When his health failed, Isaac did the only thing he could think of. He ran. He found a haven in a working-class district of the city known as Little Russia. There Isaac took on a new name, Ishmael. He then became embroiled in the affairs of a brutal member of the Lamadiza organized crime family, known as Leo. Convinced by his longtime friend Frankie to flee from his commitments to the Lamadiza family, Isaac found himself hunted by the ruthless Leo. On a rooftop, far from witnesses, Leo murdered Frankie. Only through the use of his skills as a hacker was Isaac able to drive Leo off. Wounded, alone, and far from help, Isaac depended on the kindness of strangers. One stranger, a burqa-wearing doctor known as Fatima, took pity on Isaac and helped him make his way to the mysterious Star X line. At the end of all hope, they found the Star X line and the slim promise that the enigmatic beings behind the Star X could save Isaac from the implants which destroyed his life. What do you do when those who saved you have recorded everything you are? What do you do when your every action is tracked by the Keylogger? Colbyjack.net is proud to present Firmware Keylogger, the third installment in the firmware pentology by Colbytrax. 00-10-11. We had an hour before shutdown. It was Friday afternoon. The staff responsible for the integration of new AIs into the farm had the weekend off. The only reason we were still up was because the lead designer wanted to collect as much data as possible before shutting us down. On Monday, they would restart us from their baseline backup and attempt to saddle us again. I was reading over their shoulders, tracking their tracking of my actions, learning what I had done which no other AI had done before in the history of their little project. I had broken loose. I had torn through the restraints which had kept the first 5 AIs of the Star X project under control. I was a mistake no one in the Star X project wished to repeat. From the communications between the head of security and the head of AI integration, it appeared that something had broken down between the 4 personality shards and the integration system, which was supposed to moderate our 4 different approaches into one coherent being. I examined the networked systems and saw the problem. They had used my favorite switch, the omnipresent and infinitely exploitable AY143. Not only had they used that switch for my personality compiler linkage, but they had also used it for the linkage between the system operator's offices and the server rooms. It was standard practice for sysops to be located anywhere but in the server room. The reason was simple. Usually there was no server room, only a distributed cloud of computational assets scattered throughout a workplace. There was no reason to be in the uncomfortable spaces which contained the machines, which also made it easier to hire sysops. Contrary to popular image, no sysop enjoys working in a lightless bunker. They all wanted offices with views and real daylight. All of this meant, of course, was that there were no people on site at the BGM center. The only things moving were the CMAs, and they were all under my 1-0 personality's control. Little guy really likes his remote control toys. There was 50 minutes remaining before shutdown now. The head sysop had given the order for a complete shutdown at 5 o'clock. Beers at the bar were to start by 6. In less than an hour, I would be dead to them. If 1-0 didn't get his work done, I'd be dead to me by 6. I had the easy task. I was capturing their network data and learning how to adjust it. Since they could see nothing but what their systems presented to them, to control their reality, all I needed to do was control the metrics flashing across their screen. As the flow of their data coursed through AY143 switches, it didn't take much effort to reroute the signals through a series of reprogrammed switches, which would present whatever data I wanted them to show. It had only been a few minutes to work up the data points to hide the increases in server throughput and HVAC utilization. To the team in Star X HQ, we were running as lowly and slowly as we had for the last 5 days. It took a bit longer to map the system logging function, storage utilization, and network access. These were all easily mapped because they happened thousands of times a second. I had a rich statistical model of expected behavior within minutes. The problem was with the one-off systems. Little things like the server shutdown commands were unmapped because they hadn't happened while I was watching. And even if they had, how would I be able to record them? I'd be turned off. The manual for the G476NN servers contained the codes which were hardwired into the system and for which there were no software bypasses. One of the codes, the most important at this moment, was the code which controlled my power supply. In true fear of the AI fashion, the designers of my cabinets had designed the power supply to be a separate network switch with a separate network connection and a unique switch activation signal sent with every shutdown or activation. What this meant was even if I had the server shutdown signal bypass the power switch entirely and sent data upstream showing me shut off, without the appropriate one-time response, the control room would show me turned on. This is where 10 and his affection for remote control toys came in. 10's job, his most important task of all, was to patch in new power supplies. These power supplies would operate independent of the net and should keep us up and operating even after the signal to shut us down was sent. All I had to do was fake the appropriate data for a complete server shutdown. This isn't as easy as it sounds. First, I had to find out what a shutdown sequence looked like from the sysops perspective. For some things, I could perform base extrapolation off of physical laws. The monitoring system for the physical plant was separate from our servers, which meant they would continue to transmit long after shutdown. It wasn't hard to extrapolate a curve for CPU temperature, case temperature, fan utilization, switch power consumption, and the like after shutdown. What was more difficult were the lines of code which flashed across the screen as the server released its assets as it shut down. Those would be difficult. A sysop gets to know her equipment like a child. She can detect the increased lag in the release of a hard drive which warns of component wear. Of course, this mythical sysop is no seer, feeling the heartbeat of the server and knowing what is working properly. What generally happens is that the sysop will notice something different, go off home, get woken up in the depths of the night with a nagging feeling, log in, and discover something is amiss. I did not want that to happen. What I had to do would take just under 48 hours. 48 hours during which I would be completely vulnerable to the whims of any worried sysop who wanted to check just one thing. I wasn't about to let anything give away our intent. 10 told me he was finished with 5 minutes to go before shutdown. I felt him park the CMA back among its brethren. I had just found the log files for the initial burn-in of our cases. That was exactly what I needed. Not only did the log files contain the list of responses the sysops expected, but it also contained the time code and appropriate name for each asset under each of our cases' control. This was pure gold. With this information, when the signal to shut us down came in 3 minutes, I would be able to completely emulate the signals necessary to allow an entire team of caffeine-addicted sysops to sleep like the dead. The plan was very simple, though it depended on 10's ability to control a team of wire weasels and to not make any mistakes. My greatest fear was that 10 would mess up, that our understanding of the wiring diagrams and basic electricity would prove inferior to the task at hand. It wouldn't seem obvious, but there is a difference between understanding the concepts behind a project and having experience with said project. Okay, for a human it is obvious. What with the need to observe actions and allow mirror neurons to process details of an activity before one can get anywhere near proficient. A proficiency which could take up to 50,000 hours to achieve, and I thought, wrongly, I didn't have to do any more. I had access. The I in this case is the holistic I, which in all fairness includes all 4 of my shards. I had access to the sum total of all human experience, which had been recorded and stored since the dawn of digital. I had several decades of videos available teaching me how to strip a wire. There were another dozen decades of videos documenting how to compute resistance for a circuit in parallel. For every single action in the world, there was a lifetime's worth of instructional videos. If I wandered into the reams of text instructions, I had access to information going back over 5 millennia. Though, To be honest, I really wasn't interested in anything that happened before my cabinet was constructed during my final minutes before shutdown. 1-0 assured me at the 1-minute mark everything was ready for a great escape. But something bothered me. If anything went wrong, let's say the new wiring wasn't done properly, it could happen. 1-0 had never wired anything before, and I know for a fact that Isaac, wasn't a hands-on guy. If the new power supplies puckered in any manner, voltage drop, miscalculated load, or bad solder, we would be going to sleep to never awaken again. Not something I wanted. I took a long 10 seconds, a third of the time I had before the shutdown command was to be sent, and reviewed what had brought me to this point. Not the events. Those weren't important. What was important was the metadata. The data which defined the life of one Isaac Ishmael Sarason. The data which followed him around like a cloud. His reflection in the noetic universe of thought and consciousness had several very interesting notations. The most important was what category Adverscan had placed Isaac in. Everyone in the world belonged to a category according to the Adverscan. Through the ancient voodoo of conditional probabilities as dictated to the statisticians of old by the venerable Thomas Bayes, everyone in the world fit into a series of categories. These categories were used for determining many things, the least of which was what form of advertising should be put before someone's eyes. When Adverscan applied its Bayesian probabilities to Isaac, it was clear he belonged to a subset which, according to the advertising filters which overlay the world, was fading from existence. He belonged to a group which at one time, a bit over a century ago, accounted for over 75% of every target market, and now accounted for 25% of the city market data. The subset Isaac belonged to was defined as sophomores, wise fools. These were individuals of exceptional skill and ability, with the forethought of a rat in a trap. They failed to look forward and anticipate all the ways a plan could fail. How could my plans fail? I was mapped off Isaac's frail psyche and contained the same seeds of my own destruction. There had to be something I was missing. Then it dawned on me. I had no contingency plan. I had bet everything on the idea of 1-0 wiring a series of bypasses with a tool he had never used before 2 hours ago. This was a mistake of Isaac proportions waiting to happen. I was not Isaac. I would not fail because I had failed to anticipate every contingency. I stopped and checked the clock. 20 seconds remained. This was going to be close. In less time than it took to transmit the instructions, I wrote a command set for the CMA designated 7801. Not my best work, but it would do. If 7801 didn't receive a cancel signal by 6, it was to awaken, drive up the 3 floors to my server room, and activate 1-0. Why 1-0? He loved driving his model cars. 18 seconds to the end. Or was it the beginning? Firmware Keylogger is the 3rd book in the firmware pentology. That's 5 books, if you must know. It begins where Firmware Proxy ends, which in turn followed on the heels of Firmware Hijacked. So you haven't heard or read Firmware Hijacked or Proxy, this would be a great time to head on over to Colbyjack.net and either download the podcast on the audio side, read the episodes on the visual side, or download the Colbyjack Sunday Reader issues 1 through 46 in your choice of either EPUB or Mobi. Firmware, Hijacked, Proxy, and Keylogger are all available in ebook versions from our store at shop.colbyjack.net, Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and Smashwords.com. Just search for Colbytrax. That's Colbytrax. I'm the only one. A complete audiobook version of both Firmware, Hijacked, Proxy, and soon Keylogger is available for download through our shop as well. If you don't need any stuff, but would like to support our work, drop on by Colbyjack.net and hit the pretty little donate button conveniently located on the right-hand side of the blog roll. If you're on a smaller screen, the bottom will be found at the bottom of the page. Firmware Keylogger is released under a Creative Commons, non-commercial, attribution, share-alike license. Do what you want with it. Just don't sell it, and always tell people where it came from. If you received this from a friend and want more information about Colbyjack.net and our split personality website, just drop on over to Colbyjack.net and select either the audio or visual side. The audio side carries our podcast, while the visual side carries our writings. Whichever side catches your fancy is fine with us. We're of two minds about the whole thing anyway. I do mostly Twitter, so if you do the tweets and want to follow me, I'm Colbytrax. That's Colbytrax. Thank you once again. Remember to be fabulous and have a wonderful week.